Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for the invitation. Hopefully my internet plays along here today. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, wherever you may be on the planet. So thanks a lot for having me today. I hope you can see the slides okay. So I understand I've got about 30 minutes and I want to leave enough time for discussion. So I'd like to give you some perspectives, let's say, from an initiative that we started some years ago here at the Institute that really was a labor of love and was always kind of a side project. And thankfully now it's turned into one of my main projects as recently as December. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about our journey and what we're doing here and how we're using essentially peer review as a vehicle to explore the scientific publishing landscape, improve quality, and strengthens methods competencies, specifically in early career researchers. So just briefly, as I mentioned, we did get some funding for Peerspectives, very grateful for that, from the Volkswagen Foundation, which is currently paying for my position, and also prior to that via the Quest Center at the Berlin Institute of Health. I myself do peer reviewing activity for various scientific journals, including the BMJ, which partners with Peerspectives. I'll talk a bit more about that in a few minutes. And I've also in the past gotten money from Novartis for a project on migraine. And of course, I'm passionate about the topic of improving peer review and training for doctoral students. So I think I don't need to tell this crowd that science depends on its peer reviewers, whether we like it or not. We rely on peer review as a quality control mechanism. And as such, it's really a central pillar in what we do. And I'm sure a lot of you get spammed with emails, some more or less legitimate every day. But it is true that in some way, science is counting on our peer review activity. I won't go into a lot of detail depending on who's watching this talk and what background they have. You may not know so much about the history of peer review. I assume most of you do. Heinrich Oldenburg, since I'm based in Germany now, is a German theologian who was a natural philosopher and has been it's often been said that he's one of the creators of modern scientific peer review. He was a secretary at the Royal Society and started sending manuscripts to experts who could judge their quality before publication. However, really, the peer review in the sense that we know it today didn't become a standard practice until sometime after World War II. For example, if you look at the Lancet, the journal was born in 1823, but it didn't adopt peer review until 1976. So in the 17th, early 18th century, decisions to accept or reject would commonly be made by the editor himself. Actually, it was always the man himself, or a small group of peers appointed by the editor. So, of course, peer reviews evolved, and probably many of you have also participated in doing peer review. Common benefits that are cited, if you look into it, what do I get out of it as a peer reviewer? Why should I contribute? Well, you get an up-to-date overview of ongoing research in your field. You can have influence on improving the evidence body and research methods. Maybe you'll get recognized by editors for your contribution. If the journal has open review and it publishes pre-publication history also by others, perhaps in your field, maybe an editor will be more likely to ask you to write a commentary or an editorial in your field. Maybe you'll get a free subscription to that journal or a discount on accessing the articles. So I'm saying this, with kind of a wink on my face, because of course these incentives maybe are not the ones that are super motivating to us who actually do a lot of the peer review work. It does often fall on the shoulders of mid-career researchers and increasingly early career researchers. One maybe advantage that I think is important is that you can learn a lot about how to improve your own research work and your own scientific writing through doing peer review. And I highlighted this point to better understand actually how this system works, the manuscript evaluation and scientific publishing system and processes from the inside. That's also why I myself, not so long ago, got interested in doing peer review as a doctoral student. Peer review, of course, we know it's not without its problems. It's often experienced by authors first and foremost as a huge and sometimes insurmountable hurdle or burden. And I'm pleased I can update this slide every time I give a talk like this. Maybe you heard about this one, the giant RATAT, I believe it was called in the paper, thanks to the AI tool Midjourney, with some Stern cells, I think they're called. And you see there's a Petri dish somewhere here with even a spoon in it. This article was published in Frontiers in Cell Development Biology, I think on the 13th of February, and it was retracted on the 16th. So it made it for 3 days. But we see, right, that peer review often fails to stop problematic studies from getting published. And without opening a discussion about journals that have maybe subpar practices or are predatory or beyond, even in the top journals, we don't always get it right as peer reviewers. There's the retraction notice. Also during COVID-19, there were a lot of examples, even resulting in top journals in the medical field, like the New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet, who altered their procedures following this SurgSphere scandal. So peer review doesn't always get it right. Problematic articles get through, but also the opposite happens, right? There's many articles that were revolutionary and changed their respective fields and how we understand a lot of, let's say, medicine and biological processes that were initially rejected. Here's the rejection letter that Hans Krebs was sent about the Krebs cycle, original Krebs cycle publication from Nature. So that's too bad, right? The peer review doesn't only let problematic articles get through. Sometimes it also makes mistakes in the other direction. And this is something when, I teach public health and epidemiology master's students, they're always somehow happy to hear that as they start publishing their own work, it's not just them that has had these types of experiences. And it's also happened in my field, epidemiology. Jamie Robbins, who is somebody I would say very well looked up to and has revolutionized in a lot of ways causal inference, which is something that I work on specifically. His pivotal, let's say, publication went ultimately into an engineering journal, and it wasn't until 1992 that these ideas found a place in epidemiology journals, even though this original publication came out in '86. So quite some, perhaps, things to think about, work to do. And beyond that, of course, is it in our job description? So I've talked to many people over the years of working on this project, all different career stages and levels. And I think it's interesting, you get a lot of different answers when you ask people how much time they spend performing peer review, and when they start to think about how much time others spend reviewing your work. And there's often a disbalance there. I think some of the biggest reviewers are publishing less, and some of the biggest publishers are not reviewing at all. And of course, when we have an incentive structure as it is, you saw the benefits, some of the benefits listed, maybe those benefits are not convincing enough to incentivize people to do review activity. But then if we outsource our quality control in science to these journals, ultimately to peer reviewers, and we rely on things like impact factors, where are these peer reviewers going to come from? Because so many of our institutions, funding bodies still rely on publications in peer-reviewed journals and some sort of metrics thereof to assess us, to promote us, to not promote us, and so on. So as I mentioned earlier, COVID-19, we saw also several retractions. And really, I would say in medicine, we saw a case where an already strained system was put under even more pressure and ultimately crunched under the pressure, I would argue. Also at the same time, and probably because of that, we started using preprint servers in, let's say, mainstream the mainstream medical, biomedical domain in a broad sense. And people, also the general public, didn't really understand what that meant, how to interpret these findings. There's this big disclaimer now, as you probably know, on medRxiv, that these articles haven't yet been through peer review. But what does that actually mean? What is this peer review? There were a lot of questions also from the media that arise during this moment. And as I kind of alluded to, it's hard for journals to find peer reviewers. So maybe it's happened to you, it's happened to me. I've had rejections of my scientific work because the journal said, well, we thought your work was interesting, but we couldn't find any peer reviewers to review your article, so we're rejecting it. And yeah, this tweet by Gary Collins, I think, yeah, it's also happened to me actually, that I've been invited to review a paper I'm an author on. It's a bit absurd. I mean, to be fair, unlike Gary Collins, I have fewer papers. I double checked in 2021, he published 60 papers. So it's maybe likely that he ends up, you know, in multiple circles like this. But I think the point holds, this kind of stuff shouldn't be happening. But it shows you the extent of the problem. So the other problem is that, of course, if we prioritize just getting reviews, and journals will basically take anyone to do the reviews if they get desperate enough, what happens to quality? How do we ensure quality? How can we improve quality? If this is supposed to be the quality control system that we have, well, the quality controllers should do a quality job. And yeah, what might improve the quality of peer reviews? Well, we don't really know. This paper from JAMA in 2002, I see it all the time. Editorial peer review, although widely used, is largely untested and its effects are uncertain. I don't think that much has changed. There has been some research, of course, done on peer review, but for example, recent publication, you can always find one by the European Research Council. You see more or less the same exact quote. Peer review is not perfect, but it's still the best system that we have. So we're kind of stuck with it. And actually, a lot of our, if our entire system is built on it, our training is built on it, or needs to adapt to accommodate it. What else can we do? How can we improve the quality of peer reviews? Maybe training. There are a lot of training modules out there. Journals often offer them on yeah, how to be a better peer reviewer. Of course, journals need peer reviewers, so they need to offer some kind of training. But if we also outsource the training of peer reviewers to journals, they may have, you know, different motivators in the back of their mind when they're building these programs. Yeah, maybe we need to select reviewers more carefully. But what if there are no reviewers? Maybe we need to give reviewers feedback on their performance, but that takes time. Do editors have time to give some kind of quality assessments to journals? Some journals do it. Sometimes, often they just keep it internally. They don't necessarily give it back to the reviewers. Maybe, and this we've seen in several clinical subject matter journals, that there's some kind of mentoring program or direct supervision, that a more senior reviewer supervises somehow a more junior reviewer, but this often leads to the junior reviewer doing all of the work and the senior reviewer kind of just signing off on it and or taking the credit. Maybe, yeah, better incentives. I tend to believe in this one. Credit and acknowledgement that actually counts for something if you do peer review. Maybe just publishing the review is a start, but money talks as well. Making it part of positions. I've talked to people where it's a part of their contract to do 10% of their time on peer review activities. That's not the case at my institution. You're probably familiar with Publons or some of these tools that you can use to track your reviewing activity, but a lot of these are also proprietary, and institutions don't really seem to care that much about published records. So that's another task that a reviewer would have to do to keep track of their own reviewing activity. Maybe greater accountability helps, open review and public review, but some people don't want to do that, especially early career researchers are sometimes scared to have their name on a review, especially when they're critiquing somebody that's a higher up, big shot in the field. So they actually might prefer to review in a closed system. We've got a lot of feedback about that. Yeah, and I mentioned the protected time already. What else? Maybe having a more live and ongoing interaction between reviewers and authors. That might not only improve the quality of the review itself, but maybe the manuscript, that person becomes almost a contributor to the paper and then is in some way invested to it. But then again, they're not, an external party to the paper. There's also, and I'm not going to get into this here, post-publication review and other variants. Automation of some tasks, especially with the AI tools, is a big topic right now. I won't go into that. But here, formally recognizing and incentivize reviewing as a valuable academic output that requires substantial time investment to perform well. I think if this is just acknowledged, like as a first step, and it's not just brushed aside, that would be important. And then again, thinking about on an institutional level, what can we do to value this activity? And maybe involving early career researchers. And that's where this idea came up some years ago to create a structured program to train health data science inclined, as we're calling them, doctoral students in peer review practice. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this group. As Max mentioned in the intro, I helped to launch the Health Data Sciences PhD program here at the Charité. And so we had a group of PhD students in mind, and thinking about what kind of skills do PhD students need moving forward, whether they want to stay in academia or not. We felt that not having formal training in peer review was something that was seriously lacking, and we were interested in developing a course to specifically practice and target these skills. At the same time, at the Charité, and this is common in Europe, I'm actually not sure how common it is in the US. I'm from the US, but I haven't lived there in quite some time, so we can talk about it in the discussion. We have what's called a cumulative PhD, or a cumulative doctoral degree conferral system, where you publish one or more papers, and then you write a sort of text that brings the 3 papers together, and that's your dissertation. You turn that in German, it's called Manteltext, like a wrapping text that somehow, finds this common theme across your publications. And in that sense, in order to get your doctoral degree, specifically the title of PhD, you need to publish. And this group, of course, has usually never published before. Maybe they published their master's thesis in some way or were involved in a prior publication, but in general, they're not really sure of what's expected. And so the idea in training them to think like a peer reviewer and understand what a peer reviewer is looking for is also very much in their interest when they're trying to navigate, how do I get my work published? We can talk about it in the discussion of whether or not this is a good system. I'm just saying this is how it is. Just for completeness sake, there's also the option to do a monography where you write like the big dissertation book, but that's becoming increasingly less common, and many supervisors actually won't even take students on who opt for this option. So this was kind of why we chose this target group, and we wanted to use peer review. I mean, it's great if you can do peer review, that's a good skill to have, but also to use this training to learn about how scientific publication works in the biomedical sciences, what is quality control, how do we do quality control in science, how might we be able to improve that, and to really have a critical discussion about that along the way. And then very practically to strengthen methods competencies. So a lot of these students have backgrounds in biostatistics, epidemiology, other adjacent, let's say, applied fields, and they've learned, let's say, in practice what a case cohort study is, but they've never seen one analyzed. And so the idea is that by reviewing a paper where you see a practical example, they can also, learn lessons for how to apply what they've learned in their studies and on a theoretical level in these actual clinical research examples. So I won't get into the details of the course because I want to also show you some results, but you can see some keywords popping out at you here of what we cover. So it's everything from the roles of the individual players to how to formulate critique, to transparency, reporting guidelines, ethical guidelines, methodological guidelines. We talk about open science, open review. We talk about systems for review and publication and also modern systems. And then we really get into the thinking of what is a reviewer looking for? What is an editor looking for? Again, thinking about how they can improve the quality of their own submissions. And then they get a lot of real world examples. They do a peer review walkthrough with us first, and then in small groups, they actually review papers in a mentored guided framework on their own. So we put together the content of the course, which consists of lectures and workshops, as well as a pre-course and a post-course assignment, using as much as we could find from the scientific literature, a lot of commentaries, because a lot of what is published about peer review is more editorial in nature. We've relied on some guides, also a lot of personal experience, interviews with experts. The BMJ has been our journal partner so far. We're looking to expand and add further journal partners, but we've also used some of their training materials and of course discussions with editors at that journal. One central aspect is that we believe from the beginning that student contribution should count. They should be acknowledged and they deserve credit, but also that they can contribute to the scientific discourse. So it was really important to us that we didn't create toy examples or just do kind of standard assignments, but that everything that was done in this course would actually contribute to real peer review activity. So this is kind of what the course structure looked like. We had a pre-course assignment where they needed to do a peer review assignment on their own under mirrored real world conditions. They get the assignment by email, like any real peer review assignment, and then they need to complete it within a time frame. And if they don't, we chase them to simulate the manuscript submission systems, getting increasingly threatening as we go. No, just kidding, but we do chase them. Then we have 4 lectures with take-home assignments and a lot of group discussion. Then the workshops happen together with the editor-mentor. There's collaborative peer review reports that are generated during that process and submitted ultimately to the journal, and then they receive feedback, of course, as part of the peer review system. They get to see what the other peer reviewers and what the editors said about the paper and follow the paper ultimately until there's a decision made. And after the course, they do another peer review assignment under real world conditions. So I won't go into too many details there. I think I talked about that. One optional thing that the students really enjoy, we do a wrap-up session where they can listen in on an editorial board meeting at the journal, and they can hear the discussions about actual papers and see how the editorial discussions are informed by the peer review reports that are used in those meetings. And it's always cool when one of the groups says, oh, that was our report that is being discussed, and some of our points are being picked up by the editors. And then we do a feedback round there. So we did a pilot of the course and we continued to adapt it in 2019 and 2020. Then we ran an evaluation study the last 3 years. And now, since I've been back, we're trying to scale up the class, which includes expanding it and adding hopefully some open source materials that others could kind of have a course in the box and roll it out at other institutions. But I wanted to just give you, it's really hot off the press because we just finished crunching the numbers and hopefully can submit the publication in the next week or 2 from our course evaluation, a scientific evaluation. And we wanted to look at the quality of the peer review reports that were generated as a part of the semester of doctoral studies among the students in the course, and if there was improvement. We also wanted to compare the quality of their post-course peer review reports to those reports that were submitted by actual BMJ reviewers for the same manuscripts, and then figure out or look at to what extent self-assessed knowledge and relevant peer review competencies differed between the pre and post-course evaluations. So for this evaluation study, we had 4 cohorts over 4 semesters of about 20 students per cohort. In total, we had 80 participants consent to participate in this evaluation study. And we used as a central metric the a review quality assessment that was based on that pre and post assignment I detailed. That was actually a real manuscript submitted to the partner journal and done under real world conditions. That was then submitted to us. And the review knowledge and skills self-assessment was done by means of an 8-question online survey to assess areas of peer review knowledge and skills, both before the course and after. And we did pre-register the study. Just to give you an idea of who was in the study, largely doctoral students, 1/4 of them were medical students. Most had never performed peer review in the past, and if they had, very few times. And I don't need to go too much into the details, but we had multiple manuscripts for the pre-post comparisons. After giving consent each semester, the students drafted these peer review reports. Then we assigned them a manuscript at random, both before the course and after of the 4. So a different manuscript each time. And then they generated these peer review reports, which were then compiled, let's say, by manuscript. And we gave them, we blinded the status of the manuscript, whether it was written before the course or after the course, and we gave them to BMJ editors to assess. And they were asked how they would rate the quality of this review overall using the review quality instrument, RQI. This is something that the BMJ uses routinely for all of the reviews that they receive at the journal. So something that the editors are very familiar with. It's a very simple tool, not very complex, of course, in what it can measure, but it's something that is often used also in research. And they then scored, we had 2 editors score each of the reports to do this pre-post comparison. We got really great feedback about the course. People have been very excited about it. They said it's useful. That's also what's been motivating us to continue. But there's also been some nice knock-on effects. The BMJ was really grateful that they got 76 group review reports during the study period. We've submitted more since then. But of course, they're happy to have peer reviewers, and the participants were exposed to a lot of new methods and examples. Many said, oh, I could use that method in my own work. I saw an application of it, I reviewed it, I understand it better. There was a lot of transference into the own projects. The students got ECTS for their work. That was something we had to lobby for internally, that the class could count for doctoral credit, and now also master's students can take it for credit. And we instructors can also get credit for teaching. So it can be part of our teaching load. And there's an advanced qualification in Germany called a habilitation. People can use teaching in this class towards their habilitation. So actually teaching peer review and learning peer review is somehow recognized as part of training that you can get credit for, which was a big win for us. We've heard a lot about reverse mentoring back to the participants' research groups, which is really cool that people have taken what they've learned and they've talked about it with their PIs or other people in their group, not only about the methods they've been exposed to, but also about peer review in general. And we've also seen methodological topics that our students have brought up in the groups reach the editorial meetings. For example, in the field of causal inference, we've heard a lot more about directed acyclic graphs, which is something we teach quite heavily in our programs, but that's really entered the discourse at the BMJ. So that's, I think, an interesting point, that your peer reviewing activity, if you're asking to show these types of diagrams for an observational analysis with the causal question, maybe that starts to be discussed at an editorial level of being something to ask for. Okay, what's next? We're trying to expand the course, make the train the trainer materials, and further advocate for peer review at our institution. I think I've made that clear. Maybe get some more money along the way. And I would just like to thank all of the people who helped make this initiative a success, especially my partner in all of this, Toivo Glatz, who's really done a lot of the heavy lifting on this project, and Tobias Kurt, who's given us excellent mentorship and supervision along the way, Nadia Volk, who's done an incredible job in coordination, and all of the other folks here, and all of our editor mentors. So without you, none of this would be possible. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm really happy for questions and discussion.